Okay, we're given a graph here of y equals x squared plus 2, and that's a function. And we know it's a function because it would pass a vertical line test. I can't draw a vertical line through the graph and hit it more than one time. So we are going to state the domain and the range. And we're going to use what's called interval notation. So there's a couple ways we could do this. Sometimes we write it as an inequality. Sometimes we write it as an interval. So the domain on anything that's a function, the domain is almost always going to be all real numbers. And you'll notice that this graph, it has a vertex down here at 0, -2, and this graph kind of shoots off to the right, and it just keeps going, and it's going to go on to infinity. And up here on the left, it's just going to keep going to infinity. If I go over to the right 100, I'm going to be able to find a place on this graph where it touches. So the interval for the domain for x, because this graph goes all the way off to the right and all the way off to the left, the domain will be written as something that looks like this. It's better rewrite that a little better. Negative infinity, infinity. And that means that it's essentially going from the smallest value is negative infinity all the way over to positive infinity, which essentially means all real numbers. Now the range actually does have a limit. The lowest value for the range is right there. The lowest value for the range is -2, and the graph just goes up from -2. So the interval for the range would be written as -2, infinity, because it goes all the way up to positive infinity, but it never goes below a -2. So -2 is the smallest value that it's going to be. A -3 is not part of the range because the graph doesn't go that low. Let's go take a look at another graph where we actually have to generate our own graph by making some values up. So the graph says y equals x minus 3 squared. And what we're really just going to do is we're going to place some numbers for x and use a little mental math and see what y would be. So let's start with something like, I don't know, well, if this is 3, let's put a 3 in here. If I put x is 3, 3 take away 3 is 0, and 0 squared is 0. So when x is 3, I'm going to write this as an ordered pair. Y is 0, and that would be over 3 up 0, and that would be that dot right there. And what if x was, I don't know, let's try 2. 2 minus 3 would be a -1, and -1 squared would be +1. So that means that when x was 2, y is 1. And so let's go over 2 up 1, and that's that point right there. And this interesting pattern, let's try 1. See what happens when I put a 1 in there. So 1 take away 3 would be a -2, and we're going to square it. So -2 squared is 4. So when I put a 1 in here, I get out a 4. Over 1, a 4. Well, interesting. I can start to see this graph do something like this. And so I'm going to plug in a couple values over here and see what happens. I'm going to try the 4. So I'll do it right here. 4, in fact, I should probably, let's just change color. 4 take away 3, that's 1. And 1 squared is 1. So when I put in a 4, I got out a 1. Interesting, when I put in a 2, I also got out a 1. I'm going to go over here, let's put a 4 and a 1, and that's that dot right there. And I'm curious, I bet if I put a 5 in, I'm going to get a 4 out. Let's try that. So if I put a 5 in there, 5 take away 3, right? We're just keeping on with the equation. 5 take away 3 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. So when I put in a 5, I get out also a 4. These are just ordered pairs, 5 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll put that dot back there. And look, this graph does the exact same thing on the other side. And it looks the same exact shape as what we had before. And so the domain, which is all of our, I just lost half my graph. The domain is essentially meaning from this graph, it can go off to the left as far as it wants and off to the right because the domain is all the x's. So we are going to write the domain as negative infinity to infinity and beyond. And the range, the smallest value for the range is right there. It's 0. So the range will be written as it starts at 0 and it only goes up. So it's going to positive infinity. And that's it.